Now, I will tell you, podcasting is a door opener like nothing else. Even radio, same. It's like I interviewed John Scully, the former CEO of Apple Computers. Most could never get in contact with this guy. I will tell you, anybody out there that's interested in podcasting, YouTube, any media production, writing. I'm a copywriter as well, so writing content, it's consistency, because when Boss Academy Radio was at its peak, I was doing 3 episodes a week plus a video recap every week, which was a lot of work. But then I was dealing with my divorce and dealing with a lot of stress from that. I started doing, 1 episode a week, 1 episode every other week.
Today on Business Growth Talks, the show where we delve into the strategy, stories, and systems behind successful businesses and the people who grow it. Today's guest is the second time that he's appeared on the show. It's Paul Kirch, who is the founder of Boss Academy and the creator of Askology Method, a framework that flips traditional sales on its head and proving the right questions are more powerful than the perfect pitch. From rebranding a decade-old business to building a movement around authenticity and curiosity, Paul's journey is a masterclass into evolving with purpose. If you're a founder, coach, or sales leader who wants to lead with value and build real trust, this is one for you. Let's get going into the show. Hello, Paul. How are you today?
Oh, it's good to see you, Mark. That was quite the intro. I hope I can live up to all that.
I'm sure you can. I have no doubt about that. So as it's the second episode that we've had, it's not going to have the same format. We're going to go into a little bit of exploring about Boss Academy and where it is now versus where it has been previously. And we'll go into Askology as well. First question I want to ask you is about Boss Academy. So why don't you share the origin story again and how it started as a radio channel and what it's developed into?
Yeah, I always say my big mouth is what created Boss Academy. I was actually at a networking event that was hosted by a fairly large, well-known tech company that was associated with the Professional Golf Association, and they were hosting these workshops, and I thought it was just going to be a networking event. I thought it was going to be a sales pitch, and I went there, and during the Q&A, the speaker was great. She talked about a lot of things that were pretty advanced, but the audience wasn't probably the most sophisticated. There's a lot of small businesses, a lot of people that were trying to figure out their way, and so she was causing some confusion during the Q&A. She was answering questions. One gentleman had a YouTube channel, and he was doing quite a bit of work on there, and he asked her a question, and I could just see his eyes kind of glaze over as she's talking. And so I raised my hand. I said, I don't have a question, but I wanted to provide some clarification to this gentleman because I think he was confused. And she goes, oh, please, we love that. She was very gracious, and I answered his question. And next thing, other people are asking me questions, and I look at her up on the stage, and she goes, no, this is what we do. We love this. Please. And the next thing I know, I'm getting asked a lot of questions. After the event was over, people are handing me business cards. It was very flattering. And this woman in the audience approached me, and she says, I loved what you had to say. I'm the general manager of a radio station in Dallas, and I would love to explore having you come on as a guest on one of our local shows. And I said, that's amazing. I gave her my card, and I said, do you have a card? And she goes, no, I don't have any cards with me. So I thought it was the old don't call us, we'll call you thing.
Yeah.
A week later, she called me, and she goes, listen, we were going to invite you on one of our shows, and that's still a possibility, but we'd rather give you your own show if you're interested. I said, what do you mean? And she goes, we started this new program, and we have a drive time show on Monday nights that we'd love to give you. It's yours if you want it. You just got to come over, meet, see the studio, and we'll talk about a strategy. And so I had this concept for a podcast I was going to launch called Boss Academy Radio. And I thought, gosh, maybe I can just launch it on live radio. And that's exactly what I did. And so it was very successful. But most of my clients were either West Coast, New York, on the East Coast, Florida, on the Southern Coast. So I was doing work everywhere except Texas. And so over time, it made more sense to move the show off either into syndication or into podcasting. And they wanted to syndicate the show, but it was going to be expensive. It was going to be time consuming. And so I just decided to move to podcasting, and that's how Boss Academy launched. And in 2017, that was 2014 when the show launched. In 2017, I ended up on a top 10 business podcast show. The media side of Boss Academy was very successful.
And what does Boss Academy stand for?
BOSS, the acronym that I created was always Business Ownership Success Strategies. And that was meant to be, every show was meant to give insights, strategies, tips, tools, things that people could leverage in their business. And that's really what the focus was. And it worked. And I was going through a divorce at the end of 2016. So when the show got its recognition as a top 10 show, I was actually, ironically enough, in the process of stepping away from the show to take care of my kids. And it was a really hard decision because it's like you finally get some recognition for all the hard work and you have to put it behind you. But I never stopped seeing the possibilities and never really stopped seeing the vision of what Boss Academy could become.
So we'll go into what Boss Academy is now, and we'll go into
Mhm.
that. But one of the questions, we've had this conversation on and off because I know Paul from a community from Boss Academy. Would you ever do it again? Start the podcast again?
It's really funny you asked that. I put so much work into the show itself. I don't know that I would ever go back to doing it the way I did it. If I did do it, I would want support. I would want a team to do the editing. And I was managing pretty much everything myself. I would hire people to edit, never was happy with what they were doing. Coming out of the radio, you have nothing but the highest quality equipment. You have production teams, you have a production manager. It's like I every episode sounded so great. And then you do podcasting. I wanted to continue that. So I had such high expectations. If I did it again, I would probably do it much more raw and real and focus more on video. And yeah, I would consider it, but it's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work. Now, I am completely sold by that. I know I've been doing mine for 7.5 years, and it takes a lot of my time, like preparing for every guest
Yeah.
takes an hour. I try and spend an hour on every guest that I have. And that's not to mention the editing and I have now got some people that are helping me with different aspects of the show, but it is a long commitment. It's a big job to do. But I just wonder, I just think you would be great. I know you've got lots of other things that you're actively working on. I
Yeah.
just wish I could come on Boss Academy podcast. That's what I'm thinking.
You and I need to talk about that then because if I know that it's so different now. When I launched mine, there was a lot of people doing it, but it was not saturated like it is. And today it's more difficult. I'd have to know that I really had a direction that made sense. Now, I will tell you, podcasting is a door opener like nothing else. Even radio, same. It's like I interviewed John Scully, the former CEO of Apple Computers. Most people could never get in contact with this guy. I've interviewed him 4 different times because I had the radio show, I had PR people. He came on my show, he liked what I had to say, he liked my approach, and he gave me a platform to interview him multiple times. You could never just pick up the phone and call somebody like that. So media
Yeah,
gives opportunities like nothing else.
there are always gatekeepers even now,
Absolutely.
but podcasting does open doors. What was the original mission for Boss, and how for you has it evolved over the years?
I'm laughing because I don't know that I had a mission at the time other than I felt very blessed. I grew up in a small town, Mark. I grew up in a town of 365 people. My graduating class had 21 students. When we were freshmen, they didn't know what to do with a class that big. And it's comical because I've lived in big cities most of my adult life, but when I was younger, I grew up in a small rural community. So I wasn't really surrounded by entrepreneurs, but I knew I always wanted to own a business. But if you've ever read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that concept, I was living the poor dad model. My dad was a school teacher that my parents believed stay in school, find a good job, let the company take care of you. And I never bought into that idea. However, I was fearful of starting my own company, so I loved the idea of having the security of a paycheck. Eventually, I was working in the market research industry, and eventually I moved into sales because I thought sales is the closest to being an entrepreneur without being an entrepreneur. You still got the paycheck, you still got the security, and it was really that. And eventually I moved into sales leadership, started doing sales coaching. So when I launched my first company in 2009, it was such a huge leap of faith. It was scary, but at the same time, I had been part of a company that was acquired and the acquisition was ugly. And it was finally I guess it was the thing that pushed me off the ledge and said, okay, it's time to do this because I couldn't stomach the idea of going to work for someone else. So when I started the radio show in 2014, I guess if there was a mission defined, it was the mission of giving back and making a difference because I had so many people that supported me when I started my company in 2009. People that I never dreamt would want to help me. I created my own little personal board of directors and I said, hey, I need some help. I'm starting this company. I don't know what I'm doing. Would you be willing to serve as a board member and just help support me? And I had 9 people from different areas of business that all said, absolutely. You tell us what you need. It wasn't a formalized board. It was just me once a month picking up the phone and saying, okay, here's what I'm working on. Here's what I'm doing. And then I've discovered there's an organization here in the States called SCORE, which is part of the Small Business Association.
Yep.
SCORE is Service Corps of Retired Execs. And I had a SCORE counselor. So between all these things, Mark, I had support that I never imagined even existed. And one thing that was really interesting, I never felt I was a creative person. I'm not an artist or anything like that. I never felt I was really creative. The day that I started my company, the creative juice just started flowing, and it's like it's never really turned off. So when I started Boss Academy, I thought, man, there's people out there that felt like I did. They wanted to start a company. They didn't know what they were doing. They didn't have a means of doing it. If I could help support them. But the more that I was a business owner, the more that I said, okay, it's not just about the people that want to start a business. It's the ones that have already taken that leap of faith and they have no idea what they're doing. And can I help them? So I guess the mission was just really to make a difference and leave an impact.
Yeah. And I think you do that. I absolutely
Thank
agree
you.
that's what you do. You've gone through a little bit of a refresh though of Boss Academy at the moment
Yeah.
recently. Can you just tell me what the change is and how you're positioning it and messaging for it is now?
Yeah, so I shut the podcast and the radio show down. 2017 was, I believe, the last recordings. And in 2021, I had come through the pandemic. All my clients were smaller. I was running a digital marketing agency and they weren't paying their bills. And I came out of that time frame stressed. I was still dealing with the fallout from my divorce and being a single parent. And I needed to absolutely transform the way that I was living. And I thought, if I can surround myself with people that are doing something that I'm not in a better frame of mind, so I was going to get back involved in a mastermind I'd been a part of, and I decided I didn't want to do that. And somebody suggested, "Hey, you've always wanted to turn Boss Academy into a community. You should do that." And I thought, well, that's a great idea. So I started hosting a weekly call, and you asked a question about where the refresh is, but at the time I didn't really know what the call was going to be. Was it a mastermind? Was it a think tank? Was it a round table? It was all those things, but it wasn't any of them. And we kept hosting this call every week and people kept showing up. And I just noticed that there was a lot of people that were coaches, a lot of people that were small business leaders that were purpose driven and they were supporting each other. They were collaborating and we were learning and growing together. I was bringing some of my coaching to the table. Other people were bringing things in. We were bringing all these speakers. And so this year, I thought, are we a mastermind? Are we a think tank? Are we a round table? Well, we are, but we aren't. But what we are is a community where you're either a coach and you come in and you've got a message to share, or you're somebody that wants coaching and you're getting support. And everyone should have a coach. Everyone should get coaching. Tony Robbins, one of the best leaders in the world, he talks about his time working with Jim Rohn and other people like that. Tiger Woods has a coach. Everyone should have support. And so Boss Academy has become that for people like yourself and myself. We're fully capable of going out and coaching and guiding someone else. But sometimes we can't see the forest for the trees. We're better at serving other people than we are serving ourselves. So Boss Academy has become that place where not only can you share your message of excellence, but you're going to get support.
What I
So
love about the group, like I would, if I had to put a name on it, I would probably put a community, because I think that's what you've really built. You've built loyal people come in every week or as often as they can,
yeah,
and they are offering support to others. The number of great conversations I've had with people in this community, and what I love about it is they're rooting for you. They really
yeah,
want you to win. They want
that's
themselves to
right.
win, obviously, but they want you to win when you're talking to them. So I would say that for me, I feel every Friday, it's 4 p.m. my time. I know it's earlier for you, but you go there, you think you might pick up something interesting, you might pick up a couple of things that a viewpoint that you might not have thought about for a while. But equally, I just love the fact that some of the people that are in that community are really rooting for you and really will do as much as they can to make your business successful just as
Yeah.
much as their own.
One of our members who's actually become a sponsor of our community, we actually have several sponsors that support our community, but one of them is named David Schneer. David, he
Yeah,
owns Merrill Research, body language expert, market researcher,
yeah,
and he has a very established business that's successful in many forms. And he said something to me a couple years ago, and this was we're far more advanced now, and we have so many more resources. But he said, he goes, Paul, he goes, every meeting, he goes, I come to, there's something I could apply in my life or my
mm,
business. He said that you have just changed the way I see business. And I thought, man, that's really powerful. I started thinking about it, and he's right. Every single week, if you come to there and you don't find something you can apply in your life or business and change the way you're doing things, then we're not doing our job or you're not paying attention. And quite
mm.
frankly, it's probably more the latter because there's always something you can apply.
So what are you now doing with the group now? Because you said you've told me and you've told people in the community that you're going to focus. You described it. You always try and think outside the box, but you're
hmm
thinking inside the box now, which I think was a really good thought process. But why don't you share with us here what you're doing within the promoting the community as well?
Yeah, thank you. And I got to pay tribute where it's due. Yvonne DeVita, who is one of our members and sponsors as well, she's with a company called Master Book Builders. She wrote a blog post about thinking inside the box. And it really kind of hit me because it was at the time I was rebranding and refocusing the energy of what we're doing. And it made me realize that instead of just trying to create something new all the time, why not we look at the resources we have within? So, one thing we've been doing when somebody comes on board as a new member, they're getting a lot of amazing resources. We've got a video library with thousands of professionally produced coaching videos and different thought leadership videos. We've got our own on demand center. We've got all these different things that are curated from our members, our sponsors, and then myself. I created a sales program that's called Askology Method. And my goal was to build Askology Method into this sales training program for entrepreneurs, small business owners, and sales teams that are with smaller companies. And I thought, you know what? I could do that, or I could bring it on board as something within Boss Academy to support our members. And yes, of course, you can come by Boss Ecology Method, but I really wanted that to be something that I brought as a resource for the community. And the more that I think we can operate within the ecosystem of Boss Academy, the more that we can become stronger and support each other. So we're launching a marketplace where our members that have amazing products and services can now sell those services not only just to each other, but also to the external market. And we'll do it under the Boss Academy brand and help support each other. So we're focusing very much on not just turning Boss Academy, it is a community, 100% agree. We call it a coaching community, but turning it into a platform of success and really just generating our own ecosystem of success that supports each other.
Yeah, and what's great about it is you've got people offering time, money, effort into making the group. So you often ask for speakers. I've presented about what we do at Podcast Introduction there. You've had David, you've had lots of people within the community and also outside the community coming in and giving great talks, great presentations on what they do. And that's been a great method of you being able to grow that community, is having some great speakers. How do you think about that plan? Because you're doing this weekly. So every Friday you have to come up with something, whether it's a person
Yeah.
or whether it's a subject, or like you give examples with videos that you were saying, the on-demand videos. How do you constantly come up with something every week that is interesting, is thought-provoking, inspiring? What's your sort of methodology? What's your plan every week on creating Fridays Cool?
Well, I say this in really the most sincere way. I'm very selfish with my approach. I think in terms of when I'm talking to somebody, could I learn from them? Could that benefit me? If it can benefit me, it's most likely going to benefit those people that are in my circle, and that'd be Boss Academy. So I'm always looking for, if I'm talking to somebody and I'm, wow, that's fascinating. We've had people come in and talk about AI and
Mm,
technology, things that aren't necessarily directly related to any of our businesses. However, with a couple of exceptions. However, every one of us is interested in that space. So I will tell you that I use AI. I'm very deliberate with it. I don't write content with AI directly, but I'll write content, take it into AI and get feedback. Or if I'm creating a brochure or something like that, I might use it for leverage. But I would have never been able to learn that had I not brought people into Boss Academy and exposed us to that. So I'm always very intentional with it, but I'm also very, because I'm the old, there was a commercial years ago, a hair club for men. There was a commercial. The guy goes, I'm not just the president, I'm also a client. And he was always talking about how he wore the hairpiece. I take that same approach. I'm not just the leader and founder of Boss Academy, I'm an entrepreneur. So if I can benefit from it, chances are you're going to benefit from it.
mm.
And the reality is you might come to a session and you go, okay, that speaker really didn't hit the mark for me. But I guarantee the next one's going to, or the one after that. And there's going to be something that you're going to go, this is a home run. So I guess that I'd say that's always been the approach. How do I make it so that if I can benefit from it, so can you?
Yeah. So let's just touch on Askology. You mentioned about it. So why don't you tell me in a little bit more detail what it is, why you've created it? I'd really like to get deep into understanding what it is and how you help people with it.
Yeah, years ago, I had a boss who was an amazing mentor, an amazing guide, and he always taught us to be a resource. He said, be a resource. And at the time, I thought resource meant that you provided the best customer service, right? You went out of your way. No, he wanted us to go deeper. And so I had a gentleman one time that asked me to, I was living in Seattle. He said, he wanted me to fly down to LA and meet with him. He wanted to talk about some business opportunities. And so I flew down, had a couple days worth of meetings, so it's not like I was just there for him. Took him to lunch, and we're sitting there, and he said, he goes, Paul, he said, I feel like I might have misled you a little bit, but I really don't have any opportunities for your company to work with ours right now. But he goes, I'm unhappy and I'm leaving. And I know you know a lot of people in the market research industry. I was hoping you could help me. My first instinct, Mark, was to be mad at this guy. And I thought, I just can't believe he wasted my time like this. And I thought, okay, be a resource. Give me your resume. Let's talk about it. I was looking through it, and this guy had worked in the toy industry for years, and he did market research in some really compelling companies like board games and things like that. And I knew somebody in a similar space, and I thought, oh my gosh, I know somebody who needs this guy. So I got done with that meeting, and I called up this gentleman, and I said, hey, he said, I think you need to take a look at this resume and see if there's interest here, but this guy's looking and he could be a great fit. They interviewed him. The guy got a job and he followed me for years and he was like totally always supporting me. And I realized that not only do you have to be a resource for people, but one of the things that led me to understanding that there was a fit was I started asking questions, and I asked the right questions. And over time in sales, I used to believe that the more you talk, the more you were going to talk somebody into buying. No, it works the opposite. The more you ask questions, the more you uncover needs, the more you connect with them emotionally, because all buying decisions take place at an emotional level, the better. So I took this idea of being a resource, asking questions, and started thinking, if I can simplify the question process, can I do something with that? And so I started working on 4 different question types and simplifying it. And the question types are leading questions, and leading questions are the ones that often in sales discussions are the most powerful. You know the answer, what they're probably going to say, but it gives you permission to talk about solutions you can provide.
Mm,
So you need to uncover what their pain points are and what's the emotional need. But by leading questions, you can ask them questions about their business that give you permission to talk about, hey, we can do this, we can solve this.
yeah.
And then investigative questions are those questions where you don't know the answer to them, but if you have that information, it could help you. And then empathy questions are the questions which allow you to connect with them at an emotional level. And then instigating questions are ones that I always tell people to use them cautiously, but if you can ask instigating questions that maybe strike a nerve, it's like,
What do you
I
mean by
can't believe,
instigating questions?
for example, it's like you could ask somebody, I can't believe that situation happened with that vendor. How did that make you feel when they screwed up that job? So that might be a question that's a little sensitive. It
Yeah.
might be a little bit of a hot button. However, if you get them talking, now all of a sudden it's okay. Um, this guy understands my business, and maybe he's even got solutions. I had an example of a situation like that where somebody had a vendor make a mistake, and I asked a pretty pointed question. I said, "Man, how did that make you feel?" And the guy goes, "We were mad. We were really upset, and quite frankly, it cost us a lot of money." And I said, you know what's interesting is my team had that same thing happen a couple of years ago, and we put a solution in place to make sure that could never happen again. He goes, "Okay, tell me more." So now all of a sudden, I took something that was a sensitive subject, got him to open up, and I had a solution which made him feel like I was going to take care of him. Very powerful.
Yeah. But you do
So
have
those
to be
4 question types
mindful.
drive
Yeah.
everything.
You have to be mindful of that type of question to,
Yeah,
to the
absolutely.
audience, to who you're talking to. But yeah, it's a really powerful story that you're going to get from them, which then you
Yeah.
can, as you say, you found a solution for that situation. So I
Yeah,
think,
Mark, you brought up a great point. You do have to be careful. And quite frankly, sometimes the first conversation isn't when you dive into some of these things. However, if you are bold and you ask questions that are questions nobody else would ask,
mm,
and you don't make them feel like embarrassed or ashamed or upset, it can open up a golden opportunity
yeah,
to be a resource in ways that another vendor or supplier could not.
yeah, absolutely. Who would you say your ideal client for Askology is? If people are coming to you and you're like, what is the target person that you're trying to
Yeah.
talk to? Small businesses, is that right?
Well, let me step back and tell you where this really started. So in 2009, when I launched my first company, it was a sales coaching and consulting agency, and I was working with small business owners that had teams, sales teams, and I was coming in and coaching their sales teams. In some situation, I was a virtual manager. I managed a team out of Nashville, Tennessee for 2 years. And a lot of the methodologies, a lot of the things I created from Askology Method. Now, the 4 questions are the foundation, but those 4 questions drive everything: negotiation, networking, you name it. And so originally it was designed for companies that had small sales teams that needed guidance. But because of the work I do with Boss Academy and the radio show and everything, I'm passionate about serving small business leaders directly that maybe don't have the resources, maybe they don't have a team. So it's solopreneurs, coaches, consultants, business leaders that are out there having direct conversations are who I have targeted Askology for. However, every bit of that content would still apply to a small sales team.
Yeah. So we've got on the show lots of business owners, entrepreneurs that are listening to this, and some of them might be founder-led sales team, like the founder might be still doing sales calls. Just really delve into the difference between a salesperson who's trying to convince you that you should buy this service versus asking really great questions that can reveal other things that can help you be able to close that sale.
When I was managing sales teams, I always looked for salespeople that were empathetic. The idea of always be closing is a very important piece of the sales process. However, the teachings of the 60s and 70s, the always be closing hardcore
Mm.
tactics have done a lot of damage and they've pushed people away. A lot of times you go into, no offense to car dealerships, because car dealerships can be one of the greatest training grounds. However,
Mm.
some people are really aggressive. So when I was hiring sales teams, I always wanted somebody that could put themselves in the shoes of the person on the other side of the table. Because if all buying decisions take place at an emotional level, which they do, why wouldn't you want somebody that can relate to, okay, this person's facing, this is why they're staying up at night. This is what's preventing them from scaling their business. So finding people that are empathetic. But over time, I think there's another piece of it, Mark, and I think that I started to figure out, why does this work for me? Why has this been something I've been able to embrace? And I've always been a curious person. There's a fine line between curiosity and nosy, right? But I'm curious. I like to get to know stuff about people. I retain that stuff and I can recall it later. So I would encourage anybody out there that wants to embrace something like Askology, what makes them better than the guy who's out there pushing a message, be curious. Then it's natural, right? You want to know things. Now, sometimes you can overdo it. You can ask too many questions, fair enough. But if it's coming from a genuine place of curiosity and empathy, you've got something. You don't have to be an empathetic person to think empathetically. As a friend of mine says, he's not empathetic, he's sympathetic. However, an understanding of the fact that you might be facing some sort of challenge in your business that I can address. If I truly believe in what I'm selling, and I believe that I'm selling it that for the betterment of my clients, why wouldn't I want to understand what your needs are? Because then maybe I can offer a solution that's going to help you.
Yeah,
Then we
and
both win.
it's solving problems. Like sales is
Right.
essentially if you can find a problem that your service business can solve, then you're going to get the close. You don't have
Yeah.
to push it on them.
Right.
They must buy this. It's more actually in a conversation if you can solve that problem, which is what's troubling them. But a lot of people, the traditional sales and like sort of 80s, 90s, early as well, was all about trying to convince people that they need the service rather than, in a way, elegantly getting to the conclusion that they get to the conclusion why they need your product or service rather than trying to push it on them.
Yeah. And there's a real problem that's, I think, a genuine problem, that most of us fall in love with our own brands. We fall in love with what we have to say, what we have to offer. We have internal conversations. We get excited about our products. We get in front of somebody and we start talking about the features and benefits. And it's, oh, this can do this for you. And this has this feature. But the person that we're talking to often is sitting there going, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to make payroll this week. I don't know what I'm going to do with that tax bill that's late. And they're sitting there dealing with emotional stresses, and we're talking about features and benefits, and there's often a disconnect. Now, that doesn't mean you don't talk about what your tools can do, but wouldn't it be better to uncover what the person's needs are
Mm.
and then talk about how those fit into a solution for them? And that's the missed opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. An area which you don't talk very much about, I've not seen you talk much about, is Evertrene and what you're doing with them. So why don't you share with my audience what you're doing with them?
Well, I appreciate that. It's really interesting because if you're on LinkedIn, you get solicited a lot. You get a lot of messages that are very, I guess, we'll just say, jumping right into the sale. And
Yeah.
I ignore a lot of them, delete a lot of them, sometimes don't respond to them. One day I got a message from this young lady in the UK, and she started talking about this organization, Evertrene. And I was like just instantly drawn to her message. And it was a company that they plant trees around the world, and they are making an impact. It's nice to have trees planted, but you don't really realize the impact that tree being planted has on the people who are planting it, the farmers, the communities. And so I was intrigued by it, and I thought, gosh, this is a really neat organization. And then she introduced me to one of the founders and one of the people on the team that directly works with the founder. And I was like, oh, this is exactly what I need at Boss Academy, a way for us to give back and make an impact. And so I started talking to them about the work they're doing around the world. And they work with some pretty large contributors. So we would be on the smaller side of it, but they loved our mission. And so I brought Evertrene to Boss Academy. So now when somebody joins as a new member, we plant trees in their name. We have speakers that come in, we plant trees in their name. And so every month we're contributing to Evertrene, buying trees, and then we have our own little farm in Madagascar where we're helping the farmers there and helping the farmers impact their community. And they don't just plant the trees, but they're planting fruit bearing trees. They get to collect the fruit, sell the fruit. And so it's making a financial impact, but also a great environmental impact. I'm not an environmentalist, but I just loved their mission and I loved their approach. And it's been really neat to be a part of it.
Yeah, and it's something I think you should talk more about. The fact that you're doing that,
Yeah.
it should be something that you should be sharing
Thank
with
you.
a wider audience because it's a fantastic thing that you do.
I appreciate that. And maybe I'm not smart enough to figure out how to talk about it in the right way because it's our way of giving back. I guess we should share it more, but it's one of those things where I don't want it to be a best kept secret, but I also don't want it to overshadow all the other great things we're doing. So I'm always trying to find that fine balance. But I appreciate you bringing that up. It makes me think that I do need to talk about it more.
Yeah.
And if you go to bossacademy.com/Evertreen, EVERTREEN, you can see a page that's dedicated to our contributions there because it is an important part of what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. Who, when you're in your teenage years, inspired you?
That's a really interesting one. I told you I grew up in a really small environment, a small community, but I had an uncle who was probably the reason that I'm in business for myself today. He owned a farm and ranch supply company. Prior to that, he'd owned a jewelry store, and he was in a lot of different businesses. Just one of the most dynamic people I've ever met. He walked into a room. He was one of those people who was just kind of people were magnetically drawn to him. He was a great storyteller. He never forgot a name. If he met you once, he was going to remember you. And we'd go visit him. He lived in Colorado in a city about, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours away from us. So we didn't get to see him that much. But when we saw him, we'd go out to breakfast or somewhere and he would remember the wait staff, the people working there. I was just always blown away at his ability to capture attention through storytelling.
Mm.
But also this idea of being a business owner just seemed so exciting. So I would say that I was inspired by him then, and even though he's been long gone, I still to this day think about him. And I've tried to become a better storyteller, and I've tried to model a lot of things that he did well
Mm.
because it was impressive to see how he left people feeling better than when he met them. And that's something I always strive to do. My daughter told me one time, she goes, Dad, you're always so nice to people when we're out, and you always make people feel so good when we go to restaurants or stores or something like that. And I've adopted that idea. I don't say I always do it perfectly. Have I ever upset anybody? Of course. But I do try and leave people better than when I met them.
I know, so that's something that I do with in a restaurant or in a shop. I've done my time doing those types of jobs in my young years, and I always think they're not necessarily doing that because they have a massive passion for if you're in a supermarket or something like
Yeah.
that or in a restaurant. So I always try and make people feel at ease when they're serving you, or because I know that sometimes it can be tough doing those types of jobs and doing those things. I think it's just like treating people well. It doesn't matter if you only meet them for a minute or something, but treating people well is something that I think the world could do with more of.
I mentioned the boss that was the mentor, and he always said be a resource. But another thing he taught me was notice everything, and that came from a few different angles. If I went into a client office, and when we were going on sales calls together, he would look at what magazines were in the waiting room. He'd look at pictures on the wall. Maybe he saw something in the person's office we were meeting that he could reference later. I remember we were in a meeting one time and he noticed that the guy had a certain brand of tennis shoes on.
Right.
So he instantly knew this person was a tennis player. And he referenced tennis at the right moment where he built this great connection with this guy. But he said always notice everything. And so when I see somebody's name tag at a restaurant or a store, I refer to them by their name. And sometimes people do a double take. Does this guy know me? But no, it's just a show of respect. And I think you're right. It's about treating people well, but I think it's also being attentive. I said I'm curious. That's one thing. But also, if you can be attentive and pay attention, you might just uncover some real great ways to connect with people.
Yeah. And something that's interesting me after what you've said, and you've referenced meeting people in their offices, flying out to meet people. How do you think sales is evolving now we're a lot more on Zoom and on our computers rather than the face to face when it's in reference to sales specifically?
Yeah. Well, face-to-face sales still takes place, but I have been out of that game for many years, not because of anything other than my business has been really more focused online and virtual. However, I'm next week going to be in Ohio meeting some clients face to face. Face to face is still the greatest way to build a connection. There's just a rapport and a way of becoming instant friends or instantly closer face to
Mm,
face. However, I was just talking to somebody about this, about Boss Academy. I've met two of our members face to face. The rest of them have all been virtual friendships. I would count you among one of my dearest friends
mm,
and several people in our community that I've never met in person. I consider dear friends. Like they're there for me through thick and thin. We jump on calls and support each other. That's to me amazing. And I think that is over time, the world has definitely gotten flatter. You could be working with somebody in India and it's almost like they're next door. In fact, I do some work with some people in India where I'm very close with them. I just think that we're able to build connections and become deeply connected through digital connections in ways that I never dreamt possible. In fact, I used to be of the mindset, Mark, that you have to meet someone face to build that.
mm.
Face to face
But,
is always going
but
to have that edge because,
yeah.
body language and you can touch and shake hands and hug and all those things. But I will tell you that I am deeply humbled at the friendships I've built from people I've never met in person.
Mm. Yeah, it's strange because I used to do everything face to face, and then
Yeah.
this online world came open to everyone. And I still think if you're a good person, if you're trying to help people, that will come off in a digital environment just as much as it would come in a face to face. But I met
Yeah.
someone a couple of days ago, and we were just closing the call, and she was in England as well, and she said, "Oh, where are you based?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm in Chiswick," and she said, "Oh, I'm in Ealing," which is like 10 minutes from each other. And I said, "What? Like, why don't we meet up in the next couple of weeks face to face?" And she was like, "Yeah, okay. Yeah, why not? Like, why don't we meet here?" And I think the blend. I'm still very much digital focused. A lot of my
Yeah.
business, I have US clients, and therefore it is mostly on digital, on Zoom and various places. But I think the opportunities to do face to face, like, there's no surprise that concerts and plays and theatre and all these things where there is a face to face, there is an emotional connection with a band, with a play, with a whatever it is. They're coming back strong after COVID, and it is things that people thirst for, and what
Yeah.
they do feel like they need that connection.
I remember somebody saying to me right after COVID that they were sick of Zoom, they were burned out on Zoom. Fair enough. But I work from home, as do you.
Yeah.
And when you work from home and you build those digital connections, I would caution to say that I've probably become a little lazy about the Zoom connections versus making the effort to go face to face.
Me
It's
too.
I used to jump on an airplane every 2 weeks at a minimum. I was flying every couple weeks, and now the idea of going to the airport just exhausts me. The idea of going and meeting somebody for coffee or lunch, it's real effort, right?
Yeah.
However, there's so much value in it. I try and keep that as something I never totally lose because it's easy to just become a little reclusive and stay at home and focus on the kids, focus on the girlfriend, and never leave the house for anything
Yeah.
other than just go hit some golf balls, which is a life I live right now. So I try and get out and do the face to face thing because I think we need that in addition.
Absolutely. I agree. Now, one of the new questions that I've got in the 6 questions, obviously, we've already done the 6 questions at the end, but something that's new, which wasn't part of the show when you were on it last, is share something that most people don't know about you.
That's really interesting. I feel like I'm a pretty much an open book and I tell people I'm so used to Boss Academy, leading Boss Academy, I open up about a lot of things. Something that people don't know about me is I shared where I grew up. You're putting me a little bit on the spot, but I played competitive billiards. I played
Okay.
pool in college. I played in the college national championships. I played in some international events, and at one point I played 8 hours a day and
Wow.
had dreams of going professional, but I didn't have the really have the discipline for that, even though I was playing a lot. That was something that was my life at one point, and I was consumed by it. The biggest mistake I made was thinking, "Oh gosh, I love pool. Let me go work in the billiard industry." And so I got a job. I was working for the Gallup organization, but I also took a job working for a company that distributed rec equipment like pool tables, shuffleboard. They had
Mm,
darts and
mm.
they sold indoor equipment and they had a mail order catalog. It was like working at a pizza shop and going home and eating pizza.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got to the point where I quit playing when I was about 29 because I was burned out on it. It's like I was around it 24/7 and got to the point where it's like the thing that I loved was the thing that I just got to the point where I couldn't stomach the idea of doing it.
Oh, what a
So,
shame. It could have been a very different story if you'd have turned pro.
yeah, but I was around a lot of the top level players. I used to go to some events that our company was very involved in. They later became sponsors of the professional billiard tour. I was around a lot of the pros, and I tell you, that's an industry that has a lot of challenges. Golf, there's so much money in golf tournaments. There's so little money in the United States in pool tournaments. And I realize snooker and in the
Mm,
UK
mm.
and billiards there has a different feel. But here there's such a seedy aspect to the pool scene. A lot of drugs, a lot of gambling, a lot of things that have prevented the sponsor money from coming in the way that it does into other sports.
Mm.
So exposed to the industry from a pretty dark side where is this really the life I want to live?
Yeah. The thing
It
is about
wasn't for
snooker
me.
players, like, 'cause snooker is massive in the UK, is
Yeah.
when you go and play snooker, you're whether it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon or 1 o'clock in the morning, it's always dark. It's always dingy. It's
Yeah.
always because I used to play pool and snooker at university. It was what we had a place quite close to us that was Willie Thorne, which was a guy in the sort of 90s that used to play, and he was based in Leicester, which is what the university I went to. And yeah, we used to go in there, and it didn't matter what time of the day. It always felt very dark and very dingy and very,
It
like
is.
in
Yeah.
the end, like you'd want to be going outside. I found that a little bit working in an office. Like I always felt I had to take a step out, go and get a coffee outside the building, go and get lunch outside the building. just to make sure that you were seeing daylight. It's one of the things that
Yeah,
I
it's
don't
true.
miss.
A lot of really good golfers or excuse me, a lot of good pool players are also golfers, and it's their way of getting exposure to the
Yeah.
sun. But I can't tell you the number of times I would go into a pool hall during early morning daylight, right outside, and you walk outside and it's pitch black, and you had no
Yeah.
idea the day had even passed. And back then, all the places, a lot of them were smoking events. So you'd walk
Yeah.
or smoking establishments. You'd walk out smelling like smoke, and yeah, I didn't get a lot of sunlight back then, but it was fun. I actually learned to play on a snooker table, so
Oh,
I love snooker. Snooker's a different game, but it's how I became a good ball maker because instead of the way the pockets are cut, you have to be very precise.
yeah. What's the plan for the next 2 to 5 years for you, Paul?
Well, that's a good question because right now I'm in the process of really scaling up what I'm doing with Boss Academy. I stepped away from my sales coaching business for a few years because I was focusing on the marketing aspect of my business, and we still do the marketing, but I'm moving more and more back to supporting companies on the sales side. So I think in the next 2 to 5 years, I want to really grow that business and take Askology Method. Right now, it's like I said, it's focused on small business owners, but I do see it being something where I roll it out for small organizations that want to embrace that and hopefully be able to scale that up. I'm on the board of directors for a company that actually has a sales playbook tool, and sales playbooks are the idea of giving salespeople the tools, the direction, the coaching, and support they need to be successful. And so we've got a product that actually we're really I'm hoping to integrate into a lot of my work that I'm doing with companies that leverages AI and kind of simplifies the process for somebody who's out there selling. Any team that's, excuse me, any company that's listening to this that's looking to leverage AI, imagine an AI suite that's actually customized for your brand, and that's what we built within this playbook. A part of.
So still a lot to do, still a lot to move forward with. You've got
Yeah.
Boss, you've got the Askology, you're working with sales teams. Lastly, where can people find you if they want to reach out to you to learn about you or your business?
I'm going to encourage you to go to paulkirch.com. That's probably a good central place. You can learn about what I'm doing. Of course, I think you'll share the links for
Sure.
bossacademy.com and askology.method.com. But any of those three locations, you'll be able to schedule time with me and connect with me. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't I used to be on every social media platform. Now Instagram and LinkedIn is where I put most of my energy. I think we sometimes try and do too many things.
Mm.
You asked about the next 2 to 5 years. One area that I know you've had a lot of success in, and I'm hoping to learn a little bit more from you. And this is why Boss Academy matters, right? Because I
Yeah.
can actually have you come in and talk about this, but leveraging YouTube as well. Because I think that YouTube's a platform which has a lot of potential.
It is very saturated, but it's such a huge audience. This is the crazy thing about it. I was talking to someone earlier on today where they were saying, "Oh, but I love podcasts. I love listening to audio. I would never do video." And I just said, "Look, sometimes you have to go where your audience is. And if there's 2 billion, I think it's something like that, 2 billion users on YouTube, you'd be silly not to try and dabble in it and see if it works for you." And yeah, it's a great growth area. I think you could, if you had a film day once a week where you just filmed content, 30-minute content to do with Askology, you would absolutely blitz it on YouTube. You really would.
Yeah, I
So
appreciate hearing that. When I had my radio show, I used to jokingly say that I had a face for radio as well. And of course, that was an old joke. But I actually created a production company that when I launched my podcast, it was branded Face
right.
for Productions. So I never did much with that, but I always thought that was fun. But
Yeah.
yeah, I
Well,
think you're right. I think the idea of, I will tell you anybody out there that's interested in podcasting, YouTube, any media production, writing. I'm a copywriter as well. So
mm,
writing content, it's consistency because when Boss Academy Radio was at its peak, I was doing 3 episodes a week plus a video recap every week, which was a lot of work. But then I was dealing with my divorce and dealing with a lot of stress from that. I started doing, one episode a week,
Mm,
one episode every other week, uh, sometimes one episode every 2 weeks.
mm, mm.
I had a massive drop off in my followers.
Yeah.
I lost so many followers because even though it doesn't seem like it would be the case, people do set expectation around your content.
Yeah.
If they're a follower of yours, your show, if you have loyal followers and 6 months, you take a break for 6 months, you're going to lose some of those people because they're going to find other things that replace that time that they were dedicating to you.
Yeah. And that's the thing with podcasting and YouTube is people don't necessarily set their schedule around your content, but when they see it, or they'll go look for it if it's a podcast when they're going out commuting, walking, whatever, gym or whatever, they'll go to an episode. And as
Yeah,
I say, like YouTube is fantastic for discoverability, a lot different to the other podcast apps. But yeah, no, very happy to talk you through what strategies I used on that at another time. But lastly, look, thank you, Paul. Thank you so much for your time
of course.
today. It's been an absolute pleasure learning more about you and Boss Academy and Askology and like even things like Evertrene. Like these things people should know more about. So thank you for being on my show. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Mark, always fun. And I've been looking forward to this. So thanks for having me on.
Pleasure. I really hope you've enjoyed that content. It's a really fascinating interview that I've done there. So please do, if you are enjoying this content, please do give it a like. Please do give a subscribe. It'd be really good to boost the subscriptions. It really makes a difference to the algorithm in YouTube. So thank you for that. If you do hit subscribe, hit the bell icon and you'll get all of the content. You'll get notified when all the content is available. Thank you so much for your time. It's really appreciated. Thanks a lot.